Australia is highly industrialized, and manufactured goods account for most of the gross domestic product. The country is self-sufficient in food, with their advantages in raising sheep and cattle and the production of grain. Australia maintains a favorable balance of trade. Its economic ties with Asia have become increasingly important, with China, Japan, and the United States being its main trading partners.
Australia is home to an abundance of diverse natural resources, leading to lots of exports of those resources, energy, and food. A lot of the imports have to do with more white-collar business. This makes sense considering Australia has a very large service sector, accounting for 70% of the country's GDP and 75% of their jobs. Australia has a high demand for resources and energy from Asia, especially China. As you can see, China is one of Australia's largest trade partners in terms of both imports and exports. This relationship is one that is relatively new. The two countries began negotiating a free trade agreement in 2005 in order to remove tariffs, non-tariff barriers, and service restrictions. This has increased the amount of trade as well as foreign direct investment in each country. Australia has free trade agreements with many countries all around the world, including the United States, China, Japan, and New Zealand. They impact the economy by increasing the amount of trade that Australia does, so much so that now the countries that are involved in trade agreements with Australia account for 45% of Australia's total trade. FDI is fairly important to the Australian economy as well. According to the CIA website, total FDI stock at home for 2013 is $598.7 billion, and FDI stock abroad in the same year was $496.4 billion. From the table, we see that mining and manufacturing are large sources of FDI in Australia, coming from mostly the United States and the UK. Due to the previously mentioned large amount of resources that Australia has, they are very popular in terms of foreign direct investment. For example, the United States invested $40 billion in the Gorgon liquid natural gas project. Australia uses a floating exchange rate that is dependent on the free market. However, the Reserve Bank of Australia does have the right to intervene in the foreign market if needed. Financial flows are really important to the economy since they increased in the recent past due to globalization, especially in portfolio flow, which is the buying and selling of financial assets. The importance of this finance really showed during the global financial crisis of 2007, which reduced a lot of the capital flow in and out of Australia. The banks and non-financial corporations took the hardest hit during this time period.
Australia's solid reputation and background serve as one of the country's greatest assets. It attracts foreign investors and immigrants. The country's reliability is backed by a AAA rating. The record shows only signs of positivity as well. Over the past 22 years, Australia has faced constant uninterrupted growth. Analytics forecast that this trend will only continue. From now until 2017, an average annual growth of 3.2
Australia has very open trade policies. Their government's trade policy statement is trading our way to more jobs and prosperity, which shows that they see trade as a way to improve the country. The government also claims that it is thanks to their open policies that they have stayed prosperous during the global financial crisis. Australia has always had a multilateral trade system that goes all the way back to when they became one of the WTO's founding members. The Australian government has 5 guiding principles of trade. They are unilateralism, which is a commitment to the pursuit of ongoing trade-related economic reform without waiting for other countries to reform their own economies. The second one is non-discrimination, which is Australia will not seek exclusive or entrenched preferential access to other countries' markets. Then there's separation, which is where foreign policy considerations will not override trade policy assessments in determining the choice of negotiating partners and consideration of proposed trade deals. The fourth is transparency, which means that the public of Australia will be well informed about trade negotiations. And the last guiding principle of trade is the indivisibility of trade policy and wider economic reform, which means that domestic economic reform, improved international competitiveness, and increased market access work together to create jobs and prosperity. As we talked about earlier, Australia encourages foreign direct investment as a way to increase their country's prosperity. And from this graph below, you can see that the top 3 countries that invest in Australia are United States, the UK, and Japan. This table shows Australia's investment abroad. So you can see that the 3 top countries that Australia invests in is United States, the UK, and New Zealand. So very similar to the countries that invest in Australia. Australia has a very strict policy on migration. Approximately only 190,000 people are granted permanent visas each year. And to obtain one of these, you need to be in one of these specific categories. You either need general skills, business skills, family migration, or refugee migration. And recently, the government has decided to cater to the high end of migrants. So they want migrants with valuable skills, specifically business skills. So to obtain a visa, you need to be interviewed and prove that you have skills that will boost Australia's production. Australia has a floating exchange rate, and as you can see from the table below, this is the most recent data for currencies compared to $1 Australian dollar. So for example, if you look at the value of a US dollar, it's 96 cents to $1 Australian dollar. So pretty similar.